As doctors in the US celebrate the successful transplant of a pig's heart into a human, doctors in Italy are delighted to have transplanted a human heart into a pig. The recipient is said to be doing well and already awake, alert, and reminiscing about his time running Benetton F1. Hello and welcome to season, or if you prefer, series 18 of Gareth Jones on Speed. I'm Gareth, he's Alex.
Hi.
And he's Zog.
Hello. Happy New Year.
Yes, happy blooming New Year. Here's a question. How long into the new year are you allowed to wish people Happy New Year before it becomes uncomfortable?
I think today is the last day.
Is it really?
By the time this goes out, we're well over a third of the way into the month.
Yep.
And after that, it just gets a bit weird. It's been like wandering around in March going, oh, Happy New Year. It's March. Leave me alone.
Yeah, I think that's right.
You may have noticed, by the way, that I'm sounding more lispy than usual today. I've just come back from the dentist and half my face is still a bit numb. So if I have to pronounce things slowly and carefully today, please forgive me. So what have you been doing in January? Have either of you been watching any motorsport on television? I'm talking about the Dakar.
I will admit I have been doing, and get your bleep button ready, I've been doing the sum total of all for January. I justified this to myself and not the fact that I have no work on. I've had a very intense 2 years of being freelance in a pandemic and I'm exhausted, so I'm having a rest. I have a PlayStation and I fully intend to use it. Guardians of the Galaxy is really good. Play that.
You haven't been doing any driving games?
No, I've been distancing myself from... Well, plus there aren't really many good ones at the moment. Gran Turismo 7's coming out in March, which I'm looking forward to. But yes, there's not much been going on. So I've been sat on my arse, been completely like an immovable object of laziness. It's been excellent.
A man of luxury.
Yes, a man of luxury.
Good. Zog, have you caught anything of the Dakar on TV?
I've been watching some of the highlights. I haven't been following it super closely, but I've been watching highlights. And I like the look of that Audi.
Yes.
Nice bit of tech.
Yeah. Audi have decided to join the Rally Raid, or arguably rejoin the Rally Raid universe again with a bespoke vehicle. I mean, it is a car. It's more of a buggy than a car. But it's called the RSQ e-tron. And I think the Q comes from the team who are running it on the behalf of Audi, who are called Q Motorsport. But I guess it also hints at Quattro.
Quattro,
if you think,
of course, yeah.
You know, Audi made their name in rallying. They took on Le Mans with new technology, and now they're doing the same at Rally Raid. And this car's extraordinary in that it's an electric car, but wait, hang on, it really isn't. It's got 3 electric motors. They are the motors from Formula E. So it's got one for the front axle, one for the rear axle. But these are, of course, MGUs, motor generator units. So it's got a third one, which is used as a dynamo, effectively, to generate electricity, well, to provide electricity for the motors. And that MGU, that third motor, is coupled to, wait for it, a 2-litre FSI DTM engine, an Audi 4-cylinder petrol engine.
Okay, so it's a range extender, essentially.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Because I'm guessing the motor, the 2-litre petrol doesn't drive the wheels.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless they're going full Chevy Volt and Vauxhall Ampere. It doesn't drive the wheels.
No, that's right.
Apart from over a certain speed, then it does drive the wheels, but that's only because it's going really fast.
Yeah, it has no direct connection between the internal combustion engine and the wheels. The engine is simply a generator.
Yeah.
And it runs between, I think, 5,000 and 6,500 revs, sort of fairly consistently, to provide energy for the battery. It's got, I think, a 65 kilowatt hour battery on board or something like that.
It's in that range. And as you say, the fact that the engine is running in a very narrow rev band is because the idea of that internal combustion engine is to run it as efficiently as possible. So running it at the speed that gets absolutely the most efficiency, and that combined with electric power to the wheels is what Audi engineers with a blank sheet of paper decided was their best solution to a Dakar rally in 2022. And yeah, as Alex says, it's basically a range extender turned up to 11. The other way of thinking it, though, is it's like an old diesel electric locomotive, but this is the really fun, wacky version of it, because it's exactly the same thing. You have electric motors driving the wheels, but the energy that is going into those motors to drive the wheels is coming from an internal combustion engine. There's a battery that's a buffer to store a lot of that energy on the way to the wheels, and so that you've got, this big chunk of energy ready to dump into the motors and to keep them running, and which will deliver energy faster than, I believe, the internal combustion engine could crank out the electrons, if you like. But yeah, this is Audi's start with a blank sheet of paper. What can we come up with? What's the best thing right now? And for this challenge... And in this case, yeah, it's a range extender. And it's doing pretty well. They won the last stage.
I think they've won 2 stages. Forgive me if I'm wrong. We're at about stage 8 or 9 today. It runs until...
to the internet.
January the 14th. Yeah, have a look.
They had a rocky start. Toyota have been making most of the running and looking very solid. And Audi were on the back foot at the start, but they've won a couple of stages. And I also like the way the car looks. This applies to, I think, quite a few of the other generation of Dakar rally cars. But it's kind of got the look of a crab, like a slightly aggressive sci-fi robot crab, which is a cool look.
Yeah, it's a very flat carapace, I think we can call it that, yeah.
Exactly, yeah, and the smaller headlights have the look of sort of evil, pin-like, I'm about to clamp you with my pincers, tear you apart and eat you look that crabs always have in their eyes.
It's a good look.
According to motorsport.com, a website I won't lie, I hate, Stage 8 Ekstrom wins for Audi. There you are. So stage 8, it's 1.
Yeah, the Dakar. I remember last year when ProDrive run their BRX Hunter for the first time. Being more interested in Dakar than I ever have been before. And again, this year with Audi coming on board with this extraordinary car, Dakar is one of the most interesting places for innovation. I can't think of an example of another motorsport series where you've got a car that uses an internal combustion engine as a range extender. And I kind of almost find it hard to believe that this is the most efficient way of doing it. And I think what you said, Zog, about the electric motors being able to get the torque down more easily is why they're doing it. So on soft surfaces, it will give them an advantage.
It may be the most efficient way of doing it. However, there is not an Audi currently in the top 10.
Of the overall,
As it stands at the moment, while we're recording this, Toyota ProDrive, Toyota Mini ProDrive, BMW, Toyota Mini, Ford and Century. Not an Audi. Not a sniff of a ring. Wait, no, that's wrong. Anyway.
As I say, I think they didn't have a great start, but they're looking up a bit now. But it's the first year they've run this vehicle, so maybe, with another year of development behind them, they'll be much stronger next year.
Yeah.
Maybe it isn't the best solution, Alex, but we'll see longer term. Why they've chosen it, I believe some of the Audi engineers felt that there was an advantage to do with power delivery and to do with the drivers being able to get a little bit more out of the car without having to change gear, basically, with the continuous, reliable torque under their right foot. The drivers liked the characteristics of this powertrain.
It makes a very interesting sound. I don't know if you've heard it at all, but you get that sort of whistle that has become familiar from, or that almost gear whine sound that is familiar from Formula E and Extreme E. But you've also, on top of that, got the sound of this engine going at the same time, and it sounds really busy when it goes by. And like you say, it looks good. But there are other innovations at the Dakar this year as well. The ProDrive BRX Hunter, which ran last year, is now running this year with synthetic fuel. They're trying to up the green credentials of the Dakar by inviting electric cars, even if they're not really electric cars because they've got fuel tank. Don't mention it. And alternative fuels. In fact, next year, I think, and then they enter properly in 2 years' time. Next year, a team from Germany, I think, who are called GCK, the Green Core Connection with a K, are running a car called an E-Blast H2, which is a hydrogen fuel cell car. It's got a 700 bar hydrogen tank on board. It's got a fuel cell, obviously, to turn that hydrogen into electricity. And it will be a proper silent electric car. And this is great. Here we have a motorsport series where we've got petrol cars and diesel trucks and electric cars, albeit with an internal combustion engine, and a hydrogen fuel cell car, all running at the same time. Not always in the same category, because there are, I think, 7 categories that you can race in at Dakar. The car categories are split into T1, which are sort of prototype cross-country cars, and that itself has got a subdivision. T1E, that's the Audi electric car. T1 Plus, that's the Toyota Hilux and the BRX Hunter. And then there's T1.1, which is stuff like the BMW X5, the T1.2, which is the Mini, which is in no way a Mini, and the Peugeot 3008 DKR, which again is nothing like a Peugeot 3008, and the Ford Raptor.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah, really, yeah. And they run in T1.2. Then they have T2, which is series production cross-country cars. T3, lightweight prototype cross-country vehicles. T4, modified production cross-country side-by-side vehicles. T5, prototype and production cross-country trucks. But the really interesting thing about Dakar this year is that for the first time ever, Dakar is part of the FIA World Cup for cross-country. Now, you may remember how the World Sports Car Championship merged with Le Mans, and it sort of opened up endurance racing around the world. There have been FIA-sanctioned rally raid series, but this is a very serious attempt at turning it into a worldwide sport. I think we're at the dawn of something genuinely exciting here.
Well, let's see. You were talking about how Dakar was engaging you rather more in this last year or two than it has previously.
Yeah.
It seems to me that part of the appeal that it has, which maybe is a bit more significant right now, is that it's an event that has a lot more of a sense of adventure and challenge, and a real physical challenge, a real endurance challenge.
Yeah.
In a way that, I mean, even, the 24 Hours of Le Mans is a fantastic race, wonderful event, but the reliability of the cars, the number of cars that are actually finishing out of the starting field in the last 10, 20 years, it's becoming a much more easy event to finish than it was 50 years ago, when it really was the Grand Prix d'Endurance.
Yep.
Dakar, on the other hand, it's a real massive challenge, and not just the physical challenge you'd expect, but because of where it's run, sometimes they have to cancel stages and bits for all kinds of safety reasons.
Yep.
Some is political, there's sometimes just to do with the fact that that route that they've chosen has turned out to be actually a lot rougher on, say, the motorbikes than they'd realised, and they decided it's not safe to carry on, which I think they did for one of the stages this year. It's also an event which is actually relatively attainable. I mean, if the three of us decided that we wanted to enter the Dakar Rally, it's just about possible that we could do it. Assuming we got some other people to pay for it, of course. But it's an event that serious amateur drivers can still compete in. I mean, in living memory, Mark Thatcher famously raced in it in the 1980s and got lost in the desert. Who else? Paul Belmondo.
Yeah.
Johnny Hallyday.
Yeah.
So that combination of the fact that amateurs can have a go and that it's still a real phenomenal challenge, that gives it some real appeal, an enduring appeal.
I'm not suggesting that we put a team together and go and take on the Dakar. I would love to do that, but I don't think I'd survive, quite frankly.
Gareth Jones on sand.
Very good.
Honestly, I'd rather do the 24 Hours of Lemons. That would be my pick.
Oh, okay.
I quite fancy that. Alex is rolling his eyes in a way that I've rarely seen anyone rolling.
No. A friend of mine has a plan to do one.
Does he?
And I said I'd be his pit crew, because there's no way I'm driving against those mentalists.
Well, keep me in the loop if you like. I might be up for that.
The Dakar this year, it's the 44th running, the third time in 3 years it's been in Saudi Arabia now. And you're right that there are huge sand stages, Alex, but I was genuinely shocked to see some of the coverage where they effectively are ascending a rocky mountain. It was like Hadley Rill on the moon. It was just stones and gravel. They were scrambling up and struggling for grip and sliding back. It is so difficult. And then a number of occasions where you see cars going over the crest of a sand dune, and it's a fall off on the other side of the sand dune of about 4 stories. And so you get cars leaping over the crest and tumbling head over heels, tumbling. And then they sort of get out, they roll the car over, they fix it, and then off they go again. These people are absolute heroes. I love it. If you haven't watched the Dakar, catch the coverage on Eurosport or the highlights. It's absolutely fascinating. But there's two things in it I've got to tell you about. They have the classic section of the Dakar now as well. That one of the categories you can run in cars which have run at the Dakar previously. And there's a car that I know will make you, well, but I think both of you would love it. We all do. It's the Dakar 911, the Rothmans.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not
yeah.
a 959, but that Rothmans coloured 911, that looks like it could take on anything, and that's running. But my absolute favourite, even above the Audi and the Honda BRX, is a truck that's running again this year, which DAF built. Well, a DAF driver decided to build way back in the 80s. He went to Dakar in a DAF and realised he didn't have enough power.
Oh.
So he got another truck and he effectively reversed it into the first truck. It was the DAF double cab. It had two engines, and the engine at the rear runs a drive shaft to drive the front wheels, and the engine at the front runs a drive shaft to run the back wheels. It is the most go-anywhere vehicle you can imagine.
Of course, that makes all of the sense. Why aren't all cars like that?
Well,
Of course.
if every day we went out driving, we had to cross some of the most difficult terrain in the world, that would be the way to do it. I do it in a truck, not a car. You may remember a few years ago on the podcast, we did a Doctor Who sketch for one of our Christmas episodes. And in that sketch, the TARDIS, rather than the TARDIS, is accidentally materialised at the Eurovision Song Contest. And to illustrate this, I created the snippet of a song representing the sort of thing that was sung at Eurovision. Now, a number of years later, I have finally fleshed out that little snippet of a chorus into an entire song. Thanks to my great friend Steve Allen Jones, who helped me rework the song and rewrite it. This is Gary and Steffan Skrotum with a song about the sounds and chimes that cars make, inspired by the voice synthesis of the Austin Maestro. You're going to have this in your head forever now, and you'll never forgive me for it. This is Bing Bang Bong.
All monitored functions are working correctly.
There was a time when I was lonely, but I'm not so anymore. Because you sing to me in your sweet, sweet voice. If I accidentally leave open the driver's door, I can say goodbye to those miserable times. Now I hear your electronic chimes. Bing bang bong, I love you. Bing bang bong, you love me. Bing bang bong, I love you and you love me. Bing bang bong, bing bang bong, I love you. Bing bang bong, you love me. Bing bang bong, I love you and you love me. Bing bang bong.
Please refer to the vehicle handbook.
If I don't put on my seat belt, you must. I forget, I know it's wrong.
Seatbelt undone.
You always remind me with a ringing bell, a ding or a ting or a bing bang bong. I can say farewell to the peace and quiet. A little bell can tell you you should try it. Bing bang bong, I love you. Bing bang bong, you love me. Bing bang bong, I love you and you love me. Bing bang bong, bing bang bong, I love you. Bing bang bong, you love me. Bing bang bong, I love you and you love me. Bing bang bong.
Warning. A fault has been detected.
One sad day I noticed something missing.
Oh no.
I couldn't hear your sweet, sweet sound.
That's sad.
I'd gone and left my key in the ignition. Our battery of love was truly run flat down. I can still hear you through the mists of time. Bing, I'm yours and gone forever mine.
Have the alternator checked.
Bing, bang, bong, I love you. Bing, bang, bong, you love me. Bing, bang, bong, I love you and you love me. Bing, bang, bong,
Battery
bing,
not
bang, bong,
charging.
I love you. Bing, bang, bong, you love
The
me.
parking
Bing,
brake
bang,
is
bong,
still
I
on.
love you and you love me. Bing, bang, bong, bing, bang, bong, I love you. Bing, bang, bong, you love me. Bing, bang, bong, I love you and you love me. Bing, bang, bong, bing, bang, bong, I love you. Bing, bang, bong, you love me. Bing, bang, bong, I love you and you love me. Bing, bang, bong.
You are my driver, my owner, and I love you. Bing bang bong.
Gareth Jones on Speed! It's called Gareth Jones on Speed, which suggests that we're obsessed with fast cars, which we are, but within the parameters of the definition of this programme, we kind of like things that do over 17,500 miles per hour as well. Rockets. And this year is going to be a huge year for space exploration and space travel. We'll come to SpaceX's attempt to launch the Starship into orbit for the first time, which could actually possibly even happen this month, January. But there's lots of other massive stuff going on, not least of all, Zog, and I'm sure you'll know about this, the James Webb Telescope.
Oh, yep, absolutely, which, of course, actually launched on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
I watched launch on Christmas Day. It was a fantastic, wonderful event. A lot of cosmologists and astronomers will have breathed a huge sigh of relief that it made it safely on its way. It's currently unfolding.
It's unfolded. It successfully unfolded yesterday.
Yep. They're going through the process of locking it now, aren't they? All the elements.
There's a lot of unfolding to do. There's that big sun shield, there's the main mirror, there's the secondary mirror, there are antennae. I think there are over 300 different single point of failure steps
Oh, brilliant.
along the way. Different unfolding steps and things that have to turn on and happen before it will work at its final location. And it's going to take about 6 months for all of the kind of test procedures and run-up things to happen, and also for it to get cold enough to start working, because it's an infrared telescope, and to look at infrared things, you need a very cold sensor so that you haven't got, from an infrared point of view, you're not actually sitting in the middle of a glowing telescope, a glowing structure. So so it'll take about 6 months before it's ready to go, but then in 6 months we see the first images from James Webb, and that's going to be a new era in space astronomy. It's a big deal. It's going to be fantastic.
What I'd like you both to do now, and anyone listening, if you're near an internet, is just to bring up an image of the telescope unfolded. Hang on, I'll find a link. James Webb Telescope. The reason for this will become abundantly clear. So if you see an image of it with all the gold finery, yeah? I've got one here. Hold up.
All right, send us a link.
I've edited several films with James Webb content in. I've got a few of those pictures.
Right, hang on. This isn't a waste of time, I promise. Just open the chat. There you are. There should be an image waiting for you now.
Okay, let's have a look. Yep, that big hexagonal mirror.
It is the Forbidden Blockbusters board.
It is, isn't it?
A long lead up to a really crap punchline. But it does look like the Blockbusters board.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll have a pea, please, Bob.
Yeah.
Old favourite.
It's located at what we call a Lagrange point. There are 5 Lagrange points, aren't there?
Right, yes, correct.
But I always think that we mispronounce it. It's Lagrange, Joseph Lagrange, wasn't it?
Well, it's a bit more complicated, this, because it turns out that Leonard Euler, a Swiss mathematician, discovered 3 of the Lagrange points, I think about 50 years before Lagrange did.
Really?
And just to quickly explain for anybody, well, for almost everybody who is not familiar with the idea of a Lagrange point is a point in space. It's a special point in an orbital system, specifically in a 3-body system, such as the Sun, the Earth, and a space telescope. The gravitational physics, the orbital mechanics of 3 bodies are very, very complicated. It's very easy to work out what happens with 2 bodies. If you've just got the Sun and the Earth, it's very easy to work out what happens with those gravity-wise. You add a 3rd body in there, and their motion becomes very, very, very complicated, very hard to work out. But long story short, it turns out that there are these 5 points in that 3-body system where the 3rd small body, your telescope, can kind of sit, and it gets an equal pull from the rotational forces that are going on and the gravity of one body and the gravity of the other. And so there are these 5 special points where if you put a thing there, a satellite, a small moon, a space telescope, it could kind of sit there more or less forever without being pulled one way or another. It might have to use little bits of thrust to keep it there, but you're using little bits of thrust rather than lots of thrust. Yeah, no, it is fascinating. And honestly, as somebody who has a fairly good feel for maths and physics, I actually find it very hard to kind of visualise how these Lagrange points work. But they do.
I have a question. I'm not being facetious for a change, I know. It's a Christmas miracle. With these 5 Lagrange points, I'm just looking at a NASA website so I can kind of see where they are. With these points, the telescope is in one of them.
Yeah.
L2.
Is it a very specific point? So can only one thing be in that Lagrange point at any given time?
That's a good question.
Things tend to gather at Lagrange points, and we've had probes at L2 previously, haven't we?
I think Spitzer, so L2, maybe the Spitzer. Spitzer
It's a bit like dead water, I always think, Alex. If you've got a swimming pool with 2 feeds of water going into it, there'll be one part of that pool where the water isn't influenced by either of those, and stuff will gather. Flotsam and jetsam will gather there.
The swirling pools and eddies, I think that's a good way of visualising it.
At a point between the Earth and the Moon, there is a Lagrange point. Now, it's very close to the moon. You've got to get to a point where the gravitational pull of the moon...
Sorry.
I'm talking about the moon and the Earth at the moment.
Oh, sorry, yes, yeah. Sorry.
It's got to be very close to the moon, because the moon has something like 1.2% of the mass of Earth, so it doesn't have the gravitational pull that the Earth has. If you imagine the balance point between the pull of those two bodies is going to be much closer to the moon than it is to the big old strong Earth. Now, that I get. But the idea that there's an L2 point on the other side of the moon, or in this case, for the James Webb Telescope, it's between the big object being the sun, the small object being the Earth, and there's a point beyond the Earth. This is where James Webb is going to be, and it's about 1 million kilometres, is that right?
Something like that, yeah. And it's hard to visualise how it works, but it does work, and you can sit there. And Alex's question about, is there just one point? Can you only have one thing there?
It's an area, isn't it?
I think the answer will be, strictly speaking, yes. There is a single infinitesimally small Lagrange point out there at L2, but for all practical purposes, given that the scale in which you're working is a scale of millions of miles, hundreds of thousands, millions of miles, if you're 2,000 miles away from that Lagrange point, you're pretty much at the Lagrange point.
Okay, so
it's close enough.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think a lot of satellites or a lot of things that they put at a Lagrange point, you actually tend to put it in a little bit of an orbit around the Lagrange point rather than at the Lagrange point.
Yeah, that's right.
Although depending on which Lagrange point you're at, it has to be an orbit that uses some propellant, because I can't remember which ones they are, but at least the Lagrange points tend to be on the kind of saddles of your three-dimensional gravitational field curvature.
Right.
If you imagine one stable point in a gravitational field will be at the bottom of a gravitational well, sitting at the bottom of that pit. That's really stable, and it takes some work to get out of there. These Lagrange points are more like the top of a low mound, a low hill. You can stay at the top of that hill without expending very much energy at all. And if you kind of roll a little bit off the top of the hill, it's very easy to get yourself back to the top of the hill. It's that kind of thing.
The important thing about the James Webb Telescope is that it's going to give us deep space images that go much further back in time than we've ever been able to do before with visible light space telescopes like Hubble, of course. In fact, such as Hubble, because there's nothing else like Hubble. And so we're going to be able to understand, hopefully, more about the beginnings of the universe, which is a huge thing, and also probably be able to see, I don't know, Grand Prix from 30 years ago much more easily as well. I'm hoping that the James Webb Telescope will be able to look back at television episodes I've missed. Is that how it works? No, I don't think it is.
Maybe.
I think you're getting James Webb confused with BritBox, Gareth.
Oh,
again, the second time today. Okay, let's talk about the big one, and I'm not talking about Ariane 6, the cheaper sequel to Ariane 5. Let's talk about Mr. Musk's big Mars bus. Zog, what do you reckon? Is it going to explode on its first attempt? No, actually, I'm going to ask Alex. Alex, do you want it to explode on its first attempt? Because you don't like Elon Musk, do you?
No, well, the thing is, there's a difference between wanting cool technology to exist and thinking the person that developed it is a bit of a prick. As much as Musk's attitude is genuinely awful, like the way he conducts himself on the internet, whatever, like that really doesn't sit well with me. I really hope that cool stuff exists, because that is great.
Yeah.
And he's not the one actually building it, he's the one bankrolling it. So I hope the cool thing works.
More than bankrolling it, Alex, I think he's inspired it. It's his vision, his unfettered view of a possible future.
There was an amazing headline there of like, Elon Musk is very keen to kill someone on Mars. Be responsible for someone dying on Mars, which is dark, but weirdly true.
It's certainly true, and I'm going to be careful about commenting on something that you're reporting, somebody else has probably reported speech, but he has certainly said that he wants to die on Mars. So the headline you've just reported, that could be somebody's take on exactly what Elon Musk said about how he wants to die on Mars. It works that way. But maybe he does want to take his arch nemesis out to Mars and hit him on the head with a rock somewhere in Gale Crater.
I'm just doing a quick Google. Why does Elon Musk want to die on Mars?
Go on, what have you found?
Trip to Mars, you'll die on the way, says Elon Musk. Bunch of people will probably die during travel to Mars.
It's not a very cheery vision of space travel, you've got to say. It's not the most upbeat way of describing your pioneering space adventure, but it's probably realistic.
Human-tended spaceflight is risky and has been for a long time. And the journey there is where, you want to make mistakes early, don't you? You want to happen early before you get too far into the program. There's too much at stake. And if Starship and booster BN4, is that the one that they're using, the bottom half, the super heavy booster, if that rapidly disassembles itself on this first attempt to orbit, no real problem. And it will prevent that, hopefully, from happening the second, third, fourth, fifth attempt, and we're still some way away from people travelling on board Starship.
Yeah, correct.
But the direction that we're moving in is the correct one. If you look at what's happening at Boca Chica, which I love to say as if it's the backing track to a rap track, Boca Chica, Boca Chica, Boca Chica, Boca Chica. Or is that a train? I don't know. But the stuff that's going on there is unbelievable. They've built a rocket factory, a rocket assembly, a rocket launch site, a rocket maintenance and relaunch site. And you have to believe that this is going to happen. You look at that huge scale. I can't remember the last time such an enormous space project was taken on, apart from, the NASA program or the Soviet program or the Chinese and their launch facilities. But this is a private launch facility. And it's not just space tourism. This truly is about trying to achieve what we see in Star Trek, a multi-planet civilization.
I am entirely down with that. I think it'll be great. I think it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out. I want to see it succeed. I really, really do. Because it would be mega to have this, there's another little bit of Earth, it's over there. I think it would be quite nice. This might sound a bit virtue signally, so if you like weaponising the word woke, maybe turn off forever. It would be nice to see a little bit more public excitement about maybe fixing the mess that this bit of humanity's in before we go and make a mess on another planet. Just a little bit, and I know we're getting there. But there's less fuss and less excitement about that than maybe going to ruin another planet. But I am looking forward to being able to visit another planet. Well, I probably won't be able to, because by the time it's easy to have a quick hop to Mars, we'll all be long dead. How cheery, sorry.
I take your point, but people always say, why are we spending all this money in space when we should be spending it down on Earth? Okay, let's think about that. Every single penny spent on rocket and spacecraft development, where does that money go? Does it vanish into space? No, it's spent here on Earth. It actually helps generate revenue, and the technological leap that came from the Apollo space program led to myriad inventions and discoveries and progress in the world. The whole microprocessor revolution would not have happened without the computer work at MIT to put humans on the moon.
It would have happened somewhere else at a different time rather than America, Silicon Valley, when it did. But the United States spent a lot of money on the Apollo program, and the economy benefited enormously over the next 20 years.
And the whole planet benefited from the technology that we invented then. We have Earth resources satellites, we have oceanography satellites, we have navigation, we are monitoring and therefore being more aware of the Earth. The dawn of the Green Revolution came with that very famous picture taken from Apollo 8, which is called Earthrise.
Yeah.
Where we saw our home from a point of view that we have never seen before and went, oh my God, that's all there is. We better start taking care of it. So leaving the planet, people go to a village and the first thing they do is they climb a mountain if they can that's overlooking that village, not to see what's at the top of the mountain, but to stand at the top of the mountain and look back at their village and take a view of where they're from. And we are doing the same thing again now. That's my counter to what you said, Alex, but I absolutely agree. We need to look really hard at what's happening on this planet. And one of the ways to do that is to stand back from it.
We did enjoy a wonderfully mild December. It was very lovely. It was 16 degrees at one point.
It's a worry,
What?
isn't it? It's a worry.
I have what Clarkson would call a carbon snowshoe. But, bits of my brain started going a little funny over December, but that might be because I'm a bit tired.
You need that break, Alex. You need that break.
Yeah.
There's other stuff going on in space this year as well. In terms of human space flight, there's quite a lot going on this year as well.
Absolutely.
We'll have theoretically the first flight of Orion on STS, the American Space Transportation System, this huge mega rocket that is somewhere between
just say SLS, Space Launch System.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
STS was the shuttle, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And the SLS is kind of like building a Saturn V using shuttle technology. It's a sort of merging of those. It's not new technology, so we'll see how that goes. We've got the Boeing Starliner, this privately funded spacecraft, which has not been without massive problems. Hopefully that will finally make its first flight this year. They've failed with that on a number of occasions. The Chinese will complete Changyong, the China space station, this year. There is loads going on. It's a very exciting time to be alive if you're interested in rockets, which I'm assuming if you're listening to this podcast, hopefully you are as much as we are.
Well, and also you mentioned some of the crewed missions there, some of the human spaceflight missions. There's also, as well as the SLS Artemis unmanned mission to the moon to test that Orion capsule, get it and test the return aspect of the mission as well. There are going to be several other missions to the moon, all robotic missions. There are several NASA-sponsored private missions. I can't remember quite who's doing those.
Astrobotic are one of them.
That sounds possible. But then there's also another NASA CubeSat mission called Capstone. And then India, Russia and South Korea are also sending landers to the moon this year, all sending rovers. Then there's the European ExoMars 2022 mission, the Rosalind Franklin rover, which is a follow-up to the ExoMars orbiter that launched a couple of years ago. And this will be another rover that's exploring the Martian surface, in this case drilling quite deep into the rock to take samples and to look for signs of previous life. And this is another step along the road to a Mars sample return mission. And also, this is a very exciting one, there's the DART mission, the double asteroid redirecting test, which is this mission that NASA is carrying out, in which they're going to send a spacecraft out to this double asteroid system, Dimorphos and Didymos, and they're going to slam into, I'm not sure which they're slamming into, but they're slamming into the smaller of the two rocks to see whether it can be redirected, to see how effectively that will shift its orbital trajectory, which we want to do because we really want to know how to slightly shift the trajectory of those space rocks that eventually we're going to find are on their way to us. In the long term, we're going to be hit by more big space rock, and we'd like to know how to stop them hitting us, please.
And we've got to find out a way of doing it without sending Bruce Willis up there.
Well,
if Bruce Willis wants to go up and do his thing and save humanity, far be it from me to stop Bruce Willis saving the world. I'm all for Bruce Willis saving the world. But yeah, if you've got a better plan, let's go with that too.
I mean, these are important things.
They are, yeah. They are.
And the other thing about spaceflight is that people always say it's very expensive. It's astronomically expensive. Forgive me if I've got this wrong, but the entire Apollo space program cost $25 or $28 billion by 1972 when it was over. People say, oh, that's absurd amounts of money. Whereas each, what was it called? The MX missile that the US military was building, each one of those cost $70 million, and America ordered 100 of those, I think. So if you compare space spending to defence spending, It's like standing a bungalow next to the Empire State Building in terms of cost. We have this perception that it is far more expensive than it actually is. And that's always been one of the drums I've banged hard. People say, we're throwing this money away. No, we're spending it on Earth, and we're not spending as much of it as you think we are doing compared to defence, and the returns are far greater than you get from defence. End of lecture. Sorry.
Yep, agreed.
End of lecture.
Agreed. No argument.
And actually, end of the programme as well, because, sorry, boys and girls, we've run out of time. Sorry about that. I meant to talk about your bike, but okay, can we talk for 2 minutes about your bike? 5 minutes about your bike. Tell us quickly, Zog.
Oh, okay, very quickly. Yeah, no, I was going to tell you about a little project that I am working on at the moment to build an electronic automatic gear shifter for my bicycle.
That's not a little project, is it?
It's not a little project. It's definitely doable. It's not simple. And the reason I'm doing it... Okay, well, let me just explain what it is first. I'm designing and building a little box that will sit on the bike. It'll be attached firmly to the frame. It will be an Arduino-based box of tricks that will do the gear actuation work. It will do the work of a gear lever or a rotary gear shift changer. And it will change the gears on an internally geared Shimano rear hub. And this is my overthought solution to the problem of adding a rear brake to the bicycle, basically. I will briefly explain how I got to here. From there, my bicycle, it's a lightweight frame. It was originally a track bike, a single-speed track bike, and I got it because I wanted a lightweight, simple, and mechanically elegant bike. I didn't want a single-speed bike, so I immediately changed the hub for a 2-speed Sturmey Archer internally geared hub.
I remember that.
Which means that I get the benefits of the lightweight track frame and the cleanliness of the bike. There are no cables running from the front of the bike to the back. It only has a front brake, so there's no cable for a rear brake. There's no gear cable running to the back. I change gear by just doing a slight back pedal on the crank, and that shifts the rear hub. But a bike with only a single front brake and with a frame geometry that puts the front wheel so ridiculously close to the frame is sort of a death trap. I decided that I needed a rear brake. However, the frame does not have mounting points for any kind of rear brake hardware. Now, you could put various clamps and things on to get around that, but that would, A, be a bit inelegant. Yes, inelegant, slightly. And it would also mean that I'd then have to add a cable going from the back to the front, and I don't want to add a cable going from the back to the front. So, what I thought I would do instead was to change the 2-speed Sturmey Archer hub that I have for a rear wheel that has a 3-speed Shimano internally geared hub that also has a coaster brake, so you backpedal to apply the brake.
Yep.
So this gives me a rear brake.
Very Dutch.
However, because this Shimano hub needs an external shifter cable, I need a way of shifting the gears. Again, I do not want a cable going from the back to the front, so my solution is to make an electronic gear shifter that will read the rear wheel speed and the crank speed, and using those two inputs it will then have a little actuator that will pull on the gear shift cable, and it will shift between those 3 gears. Now, one of the bits that you'll find interesting here, Gareth, is that the actuator that I'm going to use
is a servo.
As
I knew you were going to say it.
That would be used in an RC aircraft.
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, it's one of these. I've got one right here. You could say this is great radio, of course. I'm just showing Gareth and Alex one of the servos that I'm using.
Yep, that's a 4.5 kilogram strength standard size servo. Oh, and I have an identical one to that actual model you're holding up in the RC car behind me on the shelf right now.
Well, there you go. Well, you could also build yourself a shonky bike gear shifter if you fancied. Yeah, so it's just going to be one of those servos. I'm going to have an Arduino or Arduino compatible board to drive it. We're going to have inputs from hall sensors on the rear wheel to check the rear wheel speed and therefore the bike speed. And when the bike speed is wrong for the gear that you are in, the logic that the system is going to use will be that when the bike is in the wrong gear and the crank is at a standstill, it will change gear. If the crank is moving, it will not change gear, because basically for an internally geared hub, you want to change under less load. You don't want to change gear while you're applying too much strain through the gear train. So my way of detecting minimal strain in the gear train is to wait for 0 crank revolutions.
I'm so confused.
This has been a programme full of innovation. The Audi Dakar car, the James Webb telescope, the SpaceX Starship, and your bike. You need a name for this piece of technology for your bike.
Oh, I do, you're right, yeah, I hadn't thought of it.
Zog Shift the ZS.
A
It's
ZS?
a ZS gearbox, the Zog Shift gearbox.
Oh, I like it, okay.
There it is. Not a ZF, but a ZS. With my list, that's almost impossible to pronounce correctly. ZS, ZF.
I'm going to figure that into the plan.
But I'm wondering, of all these technologies that we've discussed today, which one is going to be the most successful? I'm putting my money on Zog.
That's a brave bet.
You've been listening to Zog.
Goodbye.
And to Alex Goy.
Bye.
And to me, Gareth. Nice to have you on board. If you're enjoying Gareth Jones on Speed, spread the word, like, subscribe, and tell the world. See you for the next On Speed. Say bye, everyone.
Bye, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
For information on how to contact the show, see pictures, get song lyrics, follow us on Twitter, find our Facebook fan page, or to sponsor the show, go to garethjones.tv. Gareth Jones on Speed is made in London by Whiz Bang.
Gareth Jones on Speed! Speed! Speed!